The ZUK Z2 from Lenovo. Is this phone worth spending your money on? Let's find out. If this is your first time here, or in case you just can't remember, my name's Ash, this is C4E Tech, and you're watching my full review of Lenovo's ZUK Z2. Let's get started. The ZUK Z2 is built different than a lot of other flagships we've seen. It's not as thin as most, it isn't half curved sides. The display is the smallest amongst Android flagships, and hell, it's not even made out of metal. It has a fiberglass frame with 2.5D glass to the front and back. This helps keep the weight at a manageable 150 grams. The thickness is thanks to the fact that the Z2 houses a 3500 mAh battery despite sporting just a 5-inch display. So there are two things worth mentioning here. One, there's no notification LED, and given that this phone does not have an ambient display option either, it's a little annoying, especially when hunting for it in the dark. Number two, that key you see at the bottom, that's both a physical and capacitive key, and it also has a fingerprint scanner underneath. The fingerprint scanner works well and is always on, so placing your finger on the key wakes the device and unlocks it. It's fast and accurate. So anyway, back to the key itself. This is a multifunctional key. You can tap on it for back, press it for home. You can swipe from side to cycle between your open apps. And additionally, from the U-Touch option under settings, you can customize this key. I have it set to launch the camera on double press, recent apps on tap and hold, Google Now on press and hold. Now the learning curve here is quite steep. It took me a good 3 days to get familiar with it, but once I got used to it, it was a pleasure to use and felt very natural. So overall, we have a relatively compact phone that doesn't compromise on battery life. On paper at least. The reality, well, let's get to that in a minute. Okay, so I just love how this phone feels in hand. It's built for single-handed usage, and personally I like compact phones. So moving on, the main reason for this ease of usage is the fact that the Z2 sports a 5-inch Full HD IPS LCD display. That's a pixel density of 441 pixels per inch. This display is sharp with natural colors, the viewing angles are great, it's also quite bright so that usage outdoors is not an issue. Sadly, there's no mention of Gorilla Glass protection, but for what it's worth, ZUK states that they use hardened glass with an oleophobic coating for protection. It's just that it's not from Corning. Anyway, moving on, underneath the hood, the Z2 is powered by the Snapdragon 820 chip containing two sets of Cryo cores clocked at 2.2 and 1.6 GHz each, coupled with an Adreno 530 GPU and 3 or 4 gigs of RAM with 32 or 64 gigs of onboard storage respectively. I went with the 64 gig variant since the Z2 does not have support for microSD. Anyway, with day-to-day intense scenarios like gaming, the Z2 performed very well, ran anything we threw at it with ease, no lag, no frames dropped. The audio via the downwards firing speakers, okay, it was clear, and the audio via the 3.5mm headphone jack, call quality and cellular reception were all uniformly great. Now all this is powered by a 3500 mAh battery, and the battery life is good, but I'm still disappointed. Why? Well, I had very high expectations here. Again, why? Number one, the ZUK Z1 offered exemplary battery life. Number two, we see other phones with Snapdragon 820 and larger displays that offer this kind of good battery life. So I expected the Z2 to hold up much better. Now don't get me wrong, the battery life here is still good. Even with moderate to heavy usage, in my 7 days of testing, it lasted me through a day on each day with about 20% juice left. And this was the week where I went back to Plants vs Zombies too. So I played for about an hour each day, used the eHome camera app a lot, also uploaded a lot of videos, so a lot of Twitter and checking the comment section, mails, and with Geo 4G and Wi-Fi on all day. And of course, 2 hours of calls and music via Bluetooth. With this kind of usage and no power saving options enabled, it still got me through an entire day, so can't really complain, but it's just no ZUK Z1 when it comes to battery life. And by the way, it has the hardware for VoLTE, it's just not activated, but if and when it launches in India, expect it to support Geo. So next, let's move on to the camera. The Z2 has a 13 megapixel rear camera with an f2.2 aperture. The picture shot with this camera turned out decent enough under bright light, acceptable dynamic range, a little software sharpening, but nothing to worry about. Under low light, without optical image stabilization, the ISO levels are cranked up, and that results in a lot of noise and loss of detail. The 4K video footage was good, natural colors, lots of detail, but again the lack of OIS hurts here. The focus speeds are quite slow too. Additionally, ZUK marketed this phone as having capability to shoot 960fps slow motion, but sadly that turned out to be false. No matter what option you pick, it shoots 120fps at 720p and just lowers the frame rate when you view it on the phone. The footage itself is not bad, but the misleading marketing does leave a bad taste in the mouth. With that, let's get to the software. The Z2 runs on Android 6 Marshmallow with ZUK's own ZUI on top. At first glance, ZUI resembles every other Chinese UI, but look closer and there are a few notable tweaks. We've already seen the customizable home button, that's one. Another is a quick toggle panel that slides up from the bottom. It might be annoying with other phones, but given that the Z2 lacks capacitive keys, there's no accidentally triggering a capacitive key while pulling up the panel. So I got used to it quick and actually kinda ended up liking it. By the way, this is customizable too. The user experience on the ZUK Z2 with ZUI is solid. If you've seen our speed tests, the app opening speeds are slower than other A20 phones, but that's something you notice only when you compare them side by side. With day-to-day usage, the experience is great and memory management is top-notch. The Z2 retains a lot of apps in memory, and swiping on the home key to quickly switch between them is refreshingly new and awesome. So far, I've talked about the pros, I've talked about the cons, but what's the bottom line? Is the Z2 a phone worth considering? Well, in China, it's priced at 1799 yuan, that's about $270 or 18,000 rupees for the 332 variant, and 1999 yuan, that's $300 or 20,000 rupees for the 464 variant. For that price, the Z2 does deliver. The only major downside here is the camera, which is not as good as the ones found on the Xiaomi Mi 5 or the OnePlus 3, but given that it's priced cheaper than both phones, the Z2 seems to be a good option, even if it ends up landing in India for a couple of thousand rupees more. My 2 cents, if the camera is something you occasionally use, the Z2 should not disappoint. But if it's a priority for you, if it ranks way up on your list of things you look for in a smartphone, then no, get a OnePlus 3 instead. So that's just me. Do you agree with what I've had to say in this video? Let me know in the comments below, and if you've made it this far, subscribe. Come on, it's just a small little button. Hit it. It takes a second, helps a lot, helps with motivation, helps with putting in the long hours, bringing out more content. Anyway guys, that's it. You know the rest. If you liked it, if you disliked it, and thanks a lot for watching. Till next time, this is Ash here from C4E Tech signing off. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye now.